During the Second World War, women played a pivotal role in many different theatres of the conflict. In Britain, whilst the men were away fighting, the women took on jobs inside factories, making ammunition and war materials. Also, they took to the fields to ensure that the country had enough food, with hundreds of thousands of women joining the Land Army. But there was a role in the fighting for women found inside of the Red Army. Soviet women played a very interesting and important role in the Second World War, and many of them, as well as working hard in industry and other sectors, took up arms and were allowed to serve inside of the Soviet armed forces. Many women also fought in the partisans for the resistance group to defy the German occupations of their lands. But what was incredibly dangerous was if a female Red Army soldier fell into the hands of the German enemy. The Germans viewed their role in the fighting element of the war as truly abhorrent and disgusting, and for this many of them were executed instantly. Join us today as we look at the horrific executions of the female Red Army Soviet soldiers, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. It wasn't just in the army that women in the Soviet Union saw combat. There were a group of Soviet women aviators, and when the war broke out, there were a number of women who had training as pilots, and many of them volunteered to fight. There were no formal limits to their applications to serve in combat roles, but women were discouraged from taking to the skies or bearing arms for their country, until there was a desperate need for them. Their applications were initially blocked and were put off, until the true reality of the conflict hit Stalin, and the fact his soldiers had taken huge losses as the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Stalin's lands. The Soviet Union was the first nation which used women pilots to fly combat missions, and there were complete regiments of them that flew more than 30,000 combat sorties, and many of these women were awarded the prestigious Hero of the Soviet Union award. Famously, the 46th Taman Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was known as the Night Witches, and these women flew around 24,000 combat missions, bombing the Germans from an outdated biplane. During some of these missions, they were known for terrorising the German lines. They would fly at high altitude, and would then turn off their engines and then glide to a bombing altitude. With no engine sound, they were ghost-like, and when they hit the right altitude, they would drop their payload and cause havoc and confusion amongst the Germans. But the fighting on the Eastern Front was some of the most savage and deadly of the whole of World War II. As the Soviets took heavy losses at the hands of the Germans to begin with, Stalin had to consider how he would replace many of the men that he had lost. Some of his best officers were lost early in this manner, and he planned that women would then take part in the second line of defence, and would be trained in medical aid and nursing in aid stations, but also manning anti-aircraft positions. These roles were seen as safer than the front lines, but eventually the time came where women were to be involved in the combat. Women eventually gained a significant amount of credibility inside of the Red Army, and it's believed that around 500,000 towards the end of the war were involved. Another significant role for women was as snipers, and some of the best known female soldiers had incredible records with their rifles. Rosa Shanina, for example, was credited with 59 confirmed kills, and many women were used at Stalingrad to snipe the enemy. Some female snipers crept inside of the ruined city and took out the enemy with precision. Between 1941 and 1945, almost 2,500 Soviet female snipers were deployed, and around 500 survived the conflict, and they killed at least 11,000 members of the enemy. Also, Lyudmila Pavlyuchenko was another sniper who is classed as the most successful female sniper in history, as she managed to take out a staggering 309 German soldiers. She was known for her immense skill and was a constant thorn in the side of the Wehrmacht. But the German army saw the use of female Soviet Red Army soldiers as wrong and backwards, and they were seen as a symbol of communism. The Germans saw the women as evil, and they thought a woman's place should be in the home, and these strong views needed stamping out in the eyes of the military. For the Nazis, the use of women on the battlefield was completely against their beliefs, and because of this they were seen as the lowest of the low, and were often subject to immediate execution as soon as they were captured. Hitler was concerned that this sort of behaviour in his eyes would spread, so he ordered his soldiers to deal with them quickly. It wasn't just the Nazis who believed this, but the Wehrmacht in the German army also saw this as shocking. The commander of the 4th Army at the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, Gunther von Kluge, stated in his order that all women found in uniform were to be shot in line with the Nazi beliefs. He considered that female fighters were seen as a barbaric element of Bolshevism, but despite this order later being taken back, there was a huge amount of cruelty inflicted on female soldiers. Other significant officers inside of the German army continued to give out instruction as to how to brutally deal with the women on the battlefield that were captured. They were considered as equal to the Soviet commissars, who, as the commissar order stated from the Nazi government, should be shot dead as soon as they were captured. They were not to be given a trial, but instead were to be immediately be shot by a firing squad or simply any officer who took them prisoner. It was deemed that the women who took up arms against them should not be given a choice to live out more days inside of a concentration camp or a prisoner of war camp, but should have their lives taken away straight away. Some women were not even given firing squads, and many were hanged from the nearest tree or in gallows constructed inside of villages and towns. The remains of these women were then often left for days on end to send a clear message to anyone who passed by, seeing them. Many of the women who were captured were executed en masse, and specific German units committed many war crimes. Some were eventually transported to concentration camps, such as Ravensbruck, the largest all-female camp, but this was only a very small percentage. But many women also were encouraged to join the Soviet partisans, and this resistance element was very successful in carrying out sabotage and demolition jobs towards the enemy. But the Germans dealt very strongly with partisans, especially the women. For example, Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya was an 18-year-old girl who was arrested by the Nazis following being captured during a combat mission near to a village. She was beaten daily and was tortured and humiliated, but she gave over no information. Because of this, she was then dragged out to a gallows in front of a large crowd, who witnessed her final moments. She cried out, "There are 2 million of us, you can't hang us all." Then the noose was fastened and the stool kicked out from underneath her. Also, Zinaida Portnova was just a young girl of 15 when she joined the Soviet partisans. She hid weapons and was involved in sabotage, but when she was captured, she was interrogated and tortured. She managed to shoot one of her captors, but was brutally assaulted and tortured for hours inside of a forest, before she was then shot in the head by SS officers, while she knelt at their feet. So if a female Soviet Red Army military soldier fell into the hands of the enemy, then there was a very probable chance that they would be executed very quickly. The fact that women were allowed to fight in the Red Army alongside men showed that Stalin's need for fighters was a huge one, but there are many women who were killed in the Second World War whose story remains untold. There are undoubtedly Red Army soldiers who are women still interred on the battlefields of the Second World War, and many were killed in war crimes that the Nazis justified with their ideology and social beliefs. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.